Welcome back to Food Safety EDU. This is Jeff Feldman, Mr. F. I wanted to get back into the Coast Guard's TTP, Chapter 3. Okay, the intro, Chapter 3. Introduction. The chapter details techniques that food service personnel apply to prevent foodborne illnesses. Food service personnel acquire these techniques through formal initial sanitation training and annual refresher sanitation training when assigned to food service establishments. All right, so here we have Section A is the overview. Section B is relevant personnel. C would be employee health and screening, which is health standards. D is personnel inspections and personal hygiene. E is health practices. And F would be training and safety practices. So the overview says, food service personnel are the most important link in the prevention of transmitting foodborne illnesses. Good hygiene, health, and food service techniques of the food service worker are essential factors in the well-being of patrons, and your crew. Practices of good personal hygiene and the application of recommended food service techniques are essential in preventing foodborne illnesses. It is important to ensure all food service personnel, both military and civilian, receive formal training before assignment to duty in food service establishments. Per reference Tri-Service Food Code NAVMed 5010 series, civilian contractors are responsible for ensuring that their personnel are properly trained. Section B, relevant personnel. Commanding Officer, per reference Safety and Environmental Health Manual, Commandantess 5100 series, the CO is responsible for ensuring that hazardous conditions are abated or controlled. Okay, person in charge. This is B2. And I did a whole podcast on the PIC, or person in charge, but this is in your TTP. So the PIC, or person in charge, per reference B, the Tri-Service Food Code NAVMed 5110 series, the person in charge, PIC, is designated as the FSO, Food Service Manager, or other designated individual. The PIC procures, receives, inspects, and stores wholesome food items within his or her respective food service activity. The PIC prevents foodborne illnesses at his or her establishment by ensuring the following practices occur as required by reference B, which is the Tri-Service Food Code. 1. Food facility operations are not conducted in private homes or living quarters. So you have to do everything in a galley, properly inspected place and kitchen. Persons unnecessary to food establishment operations are not allowed in preparation, storage, or warewashing areas. So again, when I talked about the PIC in the other podcast, when people come to visit, you don't allow them in the kitchen. You have the employee go out to visit them out on the mess deck or in the dining room. We don't want anybody who's dirty or carrying, dog hair or who knows what they're carrying when they come to visit. So you keep them out. You really have to watch. And that's another thing. When we have people come to support us, right? The plumbers and the maintenance guys, they come in and they put their tools, and I love them and I really appreciate them, honestly, but they put their tools on our workstations. And so their tools are in the mud and in the crap, and then it goes on to our workstations, which is on our prep tables. So whenever these people come in, you got to wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry. You have to clean up after them. So once they move and go away, whatever equipment they were working on and the space that they were working, go ahead and clean it up properly to make sure that nothing was left behind and nobody's going to get sick from. So there's a restaurant here in Santa Rosa, and somebody came to fix the ice machine. And the plumber, what do plumbers have all over them? Potentially, well, if they're working with sewers and stuff, they have crap all over them. And it got into the ice. And then 17 people got Shigella from drinking sodas at this restaurant. There was a big outbreak years ago from Shigella because of the ice. So we really have to pay attention to who's in our operation and, control that. Okay. Employees follow appropriate hand washing guidance and personal hygiene practices. So again, clean uniforms every day, proper personal hygiene procedures. So if you're going to cough or sneeze, you cough or sneeze into your elbow, right? You cover your mouth, make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Every time you change from one thing to the other, or you're going to change gloves, you have to wash your hands. You're not supposed to just put gloves on. You have dirty hands, you put on new gloves. Well, when you're putting those gloves on, your left hand is contaminating the right glove, potentially. So we're supposed to, the answer to the test and the answer to proper procedure is to go and wash your friggin' hands and then put on gloves. Every time you change your gloves, you're supposed to do that. Okay? So employee checks food as they are received to verify sanitary conditions and that all discrepancies are reported to the PIC. So when we get a delivery, and this is what we used to do over at CIA, the food would come in. We had a scale right there, and you double check the quantity of your order. So the meat company, the fish company, they're delivering this stuff to you, right? And sometimes you order 5 pounds and they'll give you 7 pounds. Okay, so that's 2 pounds more than you wanted because they want their money. Okay, and maybe they didn't, maybe they just grabbed whatever fish and it happened to come out to 7 pounds. But you're paying, if it's, $15 a pound more, that's 30 extra bucks that you weren't counting on for your order and the delivery. So you take the food, you put it on the scale, you double check their labeling and their weights, because, the weights and measures are a regulated thing. Here in California, we have a weights and measure, and, for people who sell things, and they have to be checked. Their scales have to be calibrated. And so we want to double check that because in this case, we're the customer. And when that stupid food comes in, we want to inspect it. We want to catch it now if it's crappy. If the potatoes already have eyes on them, if it's green. So all these things that if you don't take the time to actually inspect the food coming in, then you're doing a disservice to yourself and your team. So employees check food that are as they are received, right, immediately, and then put it away immediately. Don't let it sit out, because if it sits out, it's in the temperature danger zone, and then stuff can happen. So, and I get it. Years ago, in various places that I've worked, the delivery would come in, the stuff would sit on the floor for an hour or 2 hours before the guy would put it away. It needs to get put away as soon as possible to protect it. Okay. And where we are, we're a school, so we're teaching and training the students, and they emulate us. So if we have to do the right thing all the time because they're watching us, everything we do, they're watching us, and they'll pick up our habits, good, bad, ugly, whatever. Okay. Appropriate hand washing guidance, personal hygiene practices, so everybody's clean and sanitary as they work. Those dirty aprons, that reminds me. So a lot of times the students, and I tell them in the ServSafe class. So we're giving the ServSafe class nowadays at Trace and Petaluma, and it's a 1-year pilot program to see if it's actually helping and working. So the students come in, and what I do in that class is I ask them, please have an extra apron somewhere, because they work with the chicken, they work with the turkey, they work with all these things, and then they get bloody, right? Their aprons are all bloody. So the apron is meant to protect them and their uniform, but then when it's bloody and dirty, it needs to come off and go in the laundry, and they should put on another one. So we do have plastic aprons, and when I see these things, I try real hard to remind them to change out their aprons, because it's our job as instructors to, and other leaders too, so out on the boats or other land units, control your people and give them an extra friggin' apron so that they're not cross-contaminating with all that blood that's all over their apron. So anyway, that's that personal hygiene stuff. They shouldn't be walking around all dirty. And then the other thing, there was other people, there was students who, they have wounds on their face or they have wounds on their arm, and then they pick at it. And it's a habit that they pick at these scabs on their face and other, places, and now it's on their hand, and then they go back to work, and so you got to catch them, and you got to stop them, and you got to make them realize that when they pick those wounds, that's potentially Staphylococcus aureus, and it's friggin' bacteria and nastiness that when they pick on their face and their whatever, and then they start working with food, it's disgusting. So we have to break that habit of picking at themselves. Okay. Employees follow proper cooking and holding techniques for potentially hazardous food, or the new term is TCS foods, or foods that need time and temperature control for safety. So it depends on which book you're training out of. But the FDA food code, right? It's changed every 4 years with an update every 2 years. Okay, so the FDA food code is the base for all of these things. The TTP, the Tri-Service Food Code, it's all taken from the FDA food code. Okay, but it takes time for each organization to update their book based on the food code. The food code is changed every 4 years with an update every 2 years, and so a lot of these, like the TTP and the Tri-Service Food Code, and the old Sandman, right, the Sanitation Manual, that was based on the 2001 Food Code, and it took a long time for it to finally be updated to this TTP. And the TTP, like I said in the last podcast, is that it's made to be updated more quickly than a manual. So this is a tactics and training, which they can update more often, or to be more in line with the times, the food safety code. Okay, so follow proper cooking and holding techniques for potentially hazardous food, PHF food. Potentially hazardous food, or PHF, was the old term. TCS is the new term, but it all depends on who you're talking to and which book you're reading. It means the same stuff. Okay, so I'm listening back to my why does that look so funny? Anyway, I'm listening back and realizing that I missed cooking temperatures. So right now we talked about the FDA food code, and so now it's updated, 2017 food code, and this is 2019, so they're going to come up with a supplement. And in this portion where we talk about cooking temperatures and holding temperatures, I've already talked about the holding temperature on hot holding, which is 135 degrees or better, and the cold holding is 41 degrees or less, right? So your refrigeration should hold the food at 41 or less, meaning that the machines need to be set less than 41 degrees to ensure that the food inside the refrigerator is 41 degrees or less, right? So some people will set their machines, their refrigerators, to like 39 degrees or 38 degrees because you're opening the door, closing the door, and then the machine has to overcome that. So we want to keep the food internal. So you go through and you check the internal temperature every once in a while. In the training, we talk about monitoring. So you actually assign somebody. So in a restaurant, it might be sous chef or lead line cook. And at the beginning of shift or in the middle of the shift, that person goes into the walk-in and temperatures 3 or 4 things with an internal probe thermometer to make sure that the internal temperatures of all the food in there, randomly sampled, is 41 or less. So that's holding temperatures. 135 or better for hot holding, 41 degrees or less for cold holding. And then the cooking temperatures, so with the 2017 FDA food code, the temperatures change. So when you take your ServSafe test or any of the other tests, they're testing you at the new temperatures and time relationships. So for poultry, it's 165 degrees instantaneous instead of the 15-second thing, right? But the TTP, you're still going out of 165 degrees for 15 seconds. So you're supposed to put your thermometer in the chicken and hold it there. The thermometer will reach 165, and then you wait 15 seconds to make sure that the temperature stays at 165 or better for 15 seconds. Okay, so that's what the TTP says right now. The food code and the food safety testing is 165 degrees instantaneous. So you put your thermometer in there and it hits 165, you're done, and that will come eventually when the TTP is updated. Okay, on ground meat, minced, chopped, ground meats like beef, pork, and lamb, the temperature for the TTP is 155 degrees for 15 seconds. Again, you cook a hamburger, you poke it with your thermometer, you leave the thermometer in there for 15 seconds. For the new 2017 food code, it says 155 degrees for 17 seconds. So now you just keep your thermometer in there for an additional 2 seconds. Okay. And then finally, we have 145 degrees for 15 seconds for regular pieces of meat. So when you have a piece of steak, where's the bacteria? The bacteria is on the surface of the steak. It's wherever the knife was when they were butchering out the animal. That's where the bacteria supposedly is. So we go to 145 degrees. And then when you grind it, mince it, chop it, now where's all the bacteria? Okay, now it's all mixed up inside. So that's why we go to 155. And then all poultry, chicken, turkey, duck, squab, pheasant, all those things are poultry, so 165. Okay, so that's my cooking temps. And then vegetables, 135 degrees, you cook your vegetables to 135, and then you put it on the steam line at 135. If it's going to be hot held on a steam line. If you're simply sauteing some carrots to put it on somebody's plate for immediate service, there's no temperature requirement. Okay, so that's that portion. I'll insert that into this portion. Okay, potentially hazardous food or TCS food includes milk and dairy products, meats, including beef, pork, lamb, any other kind of meat, fish. Baked potatoes made the list because botulism has grown in a baked potato, potentially wrapped in foil. So baked potato in general has made the list. But I want to say it's the baked potato wrapped in foil because it creates that anaerobic environment in the foil. The spore-forming bacteria is from the ground, the dirt, and the dust that's on the potato or other vegetables. And if it's temperature abused, if that baked potato or other TCS foods are temperature abused for enough time and temperature, so hours in the wrong temperatures, then the botulism spore can open, grow, and make somebody sick. So I have a whole FDA audio of a woman who went to a restaurant, had a baked potato, and then she got botulism and she was paralyzed, almost died, and they were able to treat her and get her back not to normal because she was still messed up. You could tell that her speech was slurred. It's like having a stroke. The body doesn't work the way it used to. So baked potatoes are on the list for TCS foods. Tofu or other soy proteins, synthetic ingredients like textured soy protein and meat alternatives. Okay, eggs are TCS foods, except those that are treated to eliminate salmonella. So when I was at the restaurant, we would get regular eggs, $17 or $20 for a case of 15 dozen. And then if we needed to do certain things, or if we're a hospital or a nursing home and you have to have pasteurized shell eggs, they treat the shell eggs in a warm water bath for an amount of time, over an hour at a certain temperature, to pasteurize the inside and the outside of the egg without cooking it. So that 15 dozen eggs in a case is going to be like $50 or $60 for the pasteurized ones. So it all depends. They're there also. So, you go down the store, you get unpasteurized eggs. But you can purchase pasteurized eggs if you're going to be making certain foods, especially if you're working in hospitals and nursing homes where you're with high-risk populations. Okay, poultry is another TCS food. Shellfish and crustaceans. Heat-treated plant food, like cooked rice, cooked beans, cooked vegetables. If it's heat-treated, so again, like the baked potato, spore-forming bacteria are in the bacteria is in the ground, the dirt, and the dust. Okay, and if the ground, right, the dirt, the dust gets contaminated into the plant food, which is normal, if you don't wash it, you have dirt on there. So then the spores are potentially there because it's happened before, and so that's why these things have made the list. You heat treat it and it activates the spore. It wakes it up. So it was dormant for hundreds of years or whatever it is. in the dirt. And then you take the carrot and then you cut it up and you saute it. Now you heat activated that spore in the dirt that was on the carrot because you didn't wash the stupid thing. And even if you do wash these things, you don't know if you got them all. So we treat it with time and temperature control. So we saute the carrot, or we make the rice, or we make the beans, or we make the other vegetables, and then we get it to a temperature of 135 degrees or better, and then we hold it at 135, so on a steam line, self-service line, or like if you go to a buffet, there's the hot area and the cold area. Those temperatures are supposed to be above 135 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent the spore bacteria. It's there. It hasn't opened and grown, but the temperature is preventing it from activating and growing, right? Because you already activated it when you heated it up. It's like, wake up, wake up, wake up. And now it's ready to do something. And if you let it sit on the table for 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 hours, then the bacteria grows and grows and grows, and it grows to a level where people can get sick. So you got to really control that. All right. Sprouts and sprout seeds. We don't serve sprouts and sprout seeds to high-risk populations, and because they're grown in a warm, moist environment that have been linked to foodborne illness outbreaks. So if you just Google sprouts and outbreaks, you'll get a whole slew of things. Okay, or you go on the internet and you look up sprouts and foodborne illness outbreaks, you'll come up with a whole bunch of options, I'm sure. And finally, untreated garlic, well, not finally, but untreated garlic and oil mixtures. The oil is an anaerobic, no oxygen environment. The garlic and the rosemary and the thyme and the other things that you want to infuse into that oil are from where? The ground, the dirt, and the dust. So they have spore-forming bacteria that's on them potentially. They go into oil, you warm up the oil, and now you heat activated the spores. And if you don't treat the garlic and oil mixture properly, if you don't take care of it properly, then the spore can open and grow to a level to cause botulism and other things and make people sick. So no, when you make your infused oils, you make it fresh every friggin' day, and then you throw it away if you don't use it. And then you make it fresh tomorrow, and then you throw it away. Botulism grows to 38 degrees, certain botulism strains. So our refrigerators are 41 degrees. So if you put it in the fridge, it still allows for the botulism to grow. Okay, and then there's other bacteria also that grow in the refrigerator. We'll get into that later. But make it fresh. Small batch cooking, make it fresh, throw it away at the end of the day. Keep it right. And now finally are sliced melons, cut tomatoes, and cut leafy greens. Fresh leafy greens that have been cut, shredded, sliced, chopped, or torn. So those have made the list. There was a big outbreak in 2008 on tomatoes. There was in 2011, there was the melons. Lettuce is happening all the time. We have the romaine lettuce recalls this week and last year. So it's a continuous thing. We always worried about meats and poultry and protein animal products. But really, you see by this list, it's everywhere. All these foodborne illness outbreaks can be caused by these things. And that's why this list of items has made the list of potentially hazardous food, which are TCS foods, foods that need time and temperature control for safety. Okay, employees need to know how to properly sanitize equipment and prevent cross-contamination of ready-to-eat foods by wearing powder-free disposable gloves when working with hands. So you have to be able to wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry. When you wash things, it's with soap. Soap is a surfactant, and it grabs onto those particulates. The soap and water, warm soapy water, and you scrub, and it helps to grab onto the oily stuff, and it helps to grab onto the particulate stuff. And then you rinse, and then that soap, which has grabbed onto those things, helps it go away, right? So you wash with hot soapy water or warm soapy water, and then you rinse to get rid of that stuff because the soap has grabbed onto it and kind of locked it in. And now when you rinse, it all goes away. And then you sanitize. So certain things we wash and rinse, like our hands. Okay, we don't sanitize our hands usually, but we just wash and rinse to get rid of the stuff. Then in this portion of the TTP, it says, prevent cross-contamination of ready-to-eat foods by wearing powder-free disposable gloves when working with hands. So if you're going to work with hands, then you wear the appropriate gloves, the right size, because if it's too big, you can cut. If it's too small, they'll rip, things like that. But you really have to train your people to wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry. When it comes to food allergies, we'll get to later, food allergen, the protein, the microscopic protein is not alive, so you can't kill it. So just sanitizing an area isn't good enough, because when you just sanitize, then you haven't gotten rid of that protein. You have to wash and rinse to get rid of that protein. That soap has to grab onto that protein and then wash it down the drain, or get it off of the table, or some of the big pieces of equipment. So wash and rinse to get rid of the allergen and other things, and then sanitize to reduce the levels of other bacteria to acceptable levels. Okay, remember in one of the other podcasts I talk about sterilization at the doctor. When you get an operation, they're going to sterilize your equipment, which kills everything. But we sanitize, which is reducing the levels of the pathogen or the bacteria to acceptable levels. So it doesn't kill everything, but it reduces it to acceptable levels. And that's what our quartz is for, and that's what our bleach is for, or chlorine and iodine if we use it. Okay, and the next one is employees are properly trained in food safety. So part of CSA school is to do the food safety session, and that's been happening for many years, which is based on the sanitation manual. And now this year, this is our third or fourth one coming. It's the Serve Safe, which is from the National Restaurant Association's Educational Foundation. And again, this is the pilot program for a year to see if it's a positive thing. And so it's the initial and ongoing training. With this one, the students actually get their certificate, which is a nationally recognized certificate. It's an ANSI and Conference for Food Protection recognized. And so it's a really terrific thing. I've been trying to get this going for the past 10 years that I've been here. And in those 10 years, I kept talking to certain instructors. It's like, hey, I need you to get certified. And, oh, yeah, I want to do it. And then they never do it. And I get it. It takes time, effort, and energy. And I've been trying, because it just is an extra good thing for you guys to have the certification. And eventually you guys are going to get out. You're going to either retire out after 20 or 30 or whatever it is. But as soon as you get out, you're going to continue to be cooking. And, maybe you're only 4 years in or 8 years in, whatever. You're going to get out. And if you're going to be a cook, when you show up with your resume, they want the ServSafe, or they want the National Registry, or they want the NEHA Prometric. So they want a certificate. And if you do it now and you become an instructor now, you're above everybody else. So that's what I've been trying to push for a long time, because I really want the people I work with to be, to have that, because I think it's a positive thing. And a lot of people, they don't care about the food safety stuff. They just want to play with the food and do fancy food stuff, and which is great too. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Okay, the next one is employees are aware of their responsibility to report information about their health as it relates to disease transferable through food. So employees are aware of their responsibility to report information. So they're supposed to. So the PIC podcast that I just did, I did it in 2015, and I updated it and put it back up this weekend. But reportable disease, there's the big six that we talk about, and that's another podcast. I have the big six. So we have the Ella sisters. So we have Shigella, we have Salmonella typhi, and we have Salmonella non-typhoidal. And then we have E. coli. Those are the 4 bacteria that we're worried about in the big six. Those are the big, there's a whole bunch of other bacteria that I'll get into. But the big 6 are the Ella sisters. So there's Shigella, Salmonella typhi, which is the human strain, non-typhoidal Salmonella, which is everything else, chicken and the egg and everything else. E. coli, intestine of animals. So the poo gets onto the animal, so it can be from birds, it can be from cows. It's normally associated with hamburger, but what's going on right now? We're having romaine, E. coli in romaine lettuce. So the feces gets in the water gets out onto the crops. So those are the 4 bacteria. And then the 2 viruses are norovirus, which we call the cruise ship virus or the nursing home virus. So talking about the cruise ship industry, and as I'm listening back, I'm looking at, we're talking about norovirus. And so I went online and I found, what did I find? This is from the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the outbreak updates for international cruise ships. So the Vessel Sanitation Program, the VSP, which I talked about in a different in a different podcast. So I went through, and there's a study from 1994 all the way up to 2019. And in 1994, norovirus, Shigella, Legionella happened in 1994. 1995 was Salmonella, Shigella, and E. coli. In 1996 was norovirus 3 times, and E. coli. 1997 was E. coli 2 times. Norovirus was 4 times. Cyclospora, right? That's a parasite in the water. 1998 we had 4 of the norovirus and a couple of E. coli. 1999 we had 5 norovirus. 2000 we had 4 norovirus and a salmonella. 2001 we had 3 norovirus. 2002, this is where it starts getting interesting, because in 2002 now they're testing and reporting a whole lot more. So 2002 there was 13 norovirus. There was Giardia, there was Salmonella, Shigella, Sapovirus, E. coli, and I already said Shigella. In 2003 there was 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 norovirus outbreaks, and then there was some other that weren't specifically identified, but there was 11 of those. So 15 norovirus plus 11 more of something that happened. Now in 2004, I'm hammered here with all this information. We have 15, 16, 17 noroviruses. The specials, we had 2 E. coli is there. Unknown. There's 6 unknowns, 7 unknowns, 10 unknowns. Specials, specials. Okay. So 12 unknowns. So they don't identify it, but if there was 17 noroviruses and then 10 unknown, that's 27 illnesses in 2004. 2005 we had 14 noroviruses. Salmonella, unknown. 2006 there was 32 norovirus outbreaks on ships, 1 E. coli and 4 unknown. In 2007 there were 17 noroviruses. There was a Shigella, a Salmonella, an Enterobacter, and Entamoeba histolytica. In 2008, 13 noroviruses and 2 E. colis. 2009, I had 10 noroviruses, 1 cyclospora, which is the parasite in the water, and then E. coli again. In 2010, we had 8 noroviruses and 6 unknowns. In 2011, we had 10 noroviruses. In 2012, we had 16 noroviruses. In 2013, there was 10 noroviruses. 2014, there was 8. 2015, there was 13 of them. In 2016, there was 10 of them. 2017, there was 9. 2018, there was 5. And then this year, which is 2019, so far there's been 8 noroviruses reported with the Vessel Sanitation Program on international cruise ships. So this is international cruise ships. So the point is that you guys, my Coast Guard friends, are on boats. And when one person gets sick, when you start touching things with your poop fingers, it can transfer and it can shed off and it can get into other people, We talk about norovirus not only as poop, as feces that gets into the food supply, and they call it the fecal oral route. It's also the vomit. So with norovirus, it's coming out both ends very quickly within a couple of hours, right? So you're having diarrhea, terrible diarrhea, plus you're vomiting. And when you go to clean that stuff up, because if somebody vomits on the deck, you're not supposed to breathe it, right? You're supposed to get absorbent material and put it on top. You're supposed to wear a mask, gloves, eye protection. You don't want this stuff, and you don't want to breathe it, because once you breathe it, then you get the virus inside you also. So it can be from the feces. It can also be from just breathing the airborne virus. Once it's vomited out, it kind of floats there for a minute, and then you walk through and breathe it. So be real careful when you're cleaning it up. But I wanted to talk about the cruise ships and the VSP, Vessel Sanitation Program, for the cruise ship industry. And because you guys are on the water also, I wanted to include this. All right, thank you. And I'll insert this into that spot. The cruise ship industry, they're not going to be too happy with this, but so the study is from the CDC. And in that, they did a study from 2008 to 2014, 74 million cruisers, right? 74 million people go on cruises internationally. And of that, it's almost 130,000 foodborne illnesses. So in the scheme of things, it's not that much, really. But the numbers that I gave a few just a minute ago kind of makes you think, because it's always there. So when people are locked together, it's there. So 129,678 foodborne illnesses reported in the VSP on cruise ships. And we also have hepatitis A virus. So the viruses are feces again, gets into the water, gets into the shellfish, and then when you have oysters, all of a sudden you're vomiting or diarrhea, or you turn yellow after 2 months because it's affecting your liver and it gives you jaundice. So if you're diagnosed by a doctor, here in the TTP it says employees are aware of their responsibility to report about their health as it relates to disease transferable through food, which are the big six. Those are the reportable diseases that you're required to report on yourself. And if you're diagnosed by a doctor, the only person that can diagnose is a doctor. So you're diagnosed, then the employee has to be excluded from working with food. Okay, and that's where the PIC, the person in charge, comes in, because they pay attention, they watch their people, and they make decisions based on the information they get from their employees. And finally, food service equipment and spaces are maintained in clean and sanitary conditions. So that was section B, relevant personnel. That was that. And then part of that on the next page is medical department. So per reference, Coast Guard Medical Manual, Commandant's 6000 series, the medical department or assigned command representative is responsible for conducting sanitation inspections, including a daily walkthrough inspection and a weekly full inspection of the food service operations. So every day there's a walkthrough, and every week there's a full inspection. And this is in the TTP. Okay. Medical screening of military and civilian food service personnel upon initial assignment for disease or unclean habits that could result in foodborne illness. So there's, what is it, that Form 600 that you guys have? You're screened by your medical professionals to determine that you do not have any of the reportable diseases, no symptoms and signs, and haven't been diagnosed by a doctor. And then for the civilians, same thing. We have to be screened before we take our positions. And there has to be documentation saying that they were cleared for service. Okay, so that's good for now. This is the U.S. Coast Guard's TTP, Tactics, Techniques, and Procedures for Food Safety and Sanitation, Chapter 3, Section A, B, and C. And I'm going to stop, A and B. I'll do Section C in the follow-up podcast, but I want to get this one up and out. And this is 30 minutes ish. So I'll get this up and out, and then I'll add the next one as I find time. All right. Thanks very much. All my best, Mr. Feldman. Food Safety EDU.